All right, we are live and
testing.
Mark, you're on the road, I understand, in the
on the road,
great state of Arizona.
Charles Kuralt had the same, they all have the same voice because they all went to the same CBS radio voice school. It was Edward R. Murrow, Walter Cronkite, Charles Kuralt, and he used to have a show, On the Road with Charles Kuralt, Sunday morning, and he would go to these various towns in a Winnebago. Turns out that when Charles Kuralt, he said he had fear of flying, but he had this Winnebago, and he goes, "We're visiting Mud Island in Memphis, Tennessee. We'll be looking at this and all these different oddities." Turns out that Charles Kuralt, upon his death, had 5 different wives with multiple children in 5 different cities.
There you go.
And that's why he was always on the road with Charles Kuralt. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, but I just remember that.
It's a brilliant plan. And by the way, I don't know if it was them specifically, but I came to learn that they used to train people to talk a certain way on the microphones due to the limitation of the technology at the time. And that's why they had the newscaster voice. And it was in this weird little pattern.
Right.
It's because it would fit within the range of what the
within
microphones
that,
could do.
CBS had their own CBS style, which is what this is Walter Cronkite. This is Charles Kuralt. It started with Edward R. Murrow on the radio. You're correct, World War II. But they all mimicked the great one, and that was taught to them to copy Edward R. Murrow's syntax.
Maybe this is at the Chicago School of
Could
Broadcasting.
be. Yeah, I don't know.
Could be. I don't know.
Came from, I don't know.
But fascinating. So, okay. I already know why you're in Arizona. Obviously, you're visiting the enemy, being a Dodgers fan. So how is the state treating an enemy fan compared to your own home stadium?
Well, I mean, like I said 2 moments ago, it's like a police state at Dodger Stadium where Elaine Boozler is handcuffed. And here, they said, don't bring this, don't bring that. We could have brought everything. They didn't really care. And they just wave you in from the street like, come on in. This is friendly Arizona. Come on in. And night and day, just night and day.
All right. Well, I'm not going to hold.
But I'll tell you this: they don't sit down to watch the game. They're more interested in staying online at the concession stands, and the inning after inning after inning. I was shocked how many people did not watch the game and were just online getting food the entire game, which is like going to a rock concert and missing all the songs because you wanted to get the Diamondback burger. It was really surprising, and just people just eating nonstop at the concessions as if they were at the beach. But that's their fan. What's that?
What are the food prices like?
It wasn't bad. It wasn't insane.
Maybe that's it. It wasn't.
I don't know. I mean, it's all relative. I mean, I was sitting in some pretty nice seats, and the people didn't seem to give a crap about what was going on the field. I mean, I was sitting with some other guy who had I didn't know who he was, but he had his kids with him. They never moved. And it's traditionally in baseball, if you're going to take a leak or going to get something, you jump up at the third out of your own team and then run to the concession or run to the bathroom in between innings to get back or to get something. Mm-hmm. Look, I saw people doing that, which is old school. But the bulk of this was like 7 girls together, drunk out of their minds with tattoos on their face in some sort of gang in Arizona. I'm not really sure what the culture is here, but they were not paying attention to what was going on, which is okay. It's not my team. What do I care?
So they weren't Maoris from New Zealand?
They look like it. I mean, the Dodgers destroyed them anyway. I have to go back tonight after the show. I'm at a hotel that's 5 minutes away, which is a real pleasure, just walking over to the stadium, which is beautiful. The roof's open. And you could see the stars at night through the roof. I mean, it's really, really a great stadium, Chase Field.
Okay. All right. So tonight we're doing a Q&A on Lee Harvey Oswald. We are hoping to possibly do an interview, but we decided against it because Mark's on the road. sometimes people get upset about technical issues with any microphone. So we thought, you know what, we'll do a Q&A to make sure that there's no issues with anybody or anything else. So
how's the sound, by the way?
you sound fine. You look
okay,
good.
I just want to make sure.
Everything seems
We're
all
just
right.
winging it here, so everything seems okay. But who knows? People get crazy with this stuff.
That's true. But
no, like Eric said, we were gonna do an interview of Bob Groden, and I think we're gonna push it to Tuesday. So I'm at home and Eric's at home, and we could just have more technical advantages.
Yeah, more guarantees. We never know on the road, because right now the hotel marks that the Wi-Fi might be perfect, and then all of a sudden, everybody starts hitting the internet, and we get brownouts. Or
is that what happens? Like people in the hotel hit it, and it's too much?
Sure, you get a lot of traffic saturation on a shared network, and that's going to be a problem.
Interesting. Oh, that's why it goes up and down. Interesting.
Well,
there's nobody here. I can tell you that right now. It seems like whoever came here is out doing touristy things, so maybe that helps.
Well, good. Tell them to stay out until you're done with
the
the show.
Don't come back till the show's over.
All right. So for this, though, those of you who are not familiar with the Q&A style we do here, because I'm kind of going all over the place, please be kind to me and say question or Q, and then what the actual question is. And this helps me to pick out comments better as I'm looking all over the place, because I know you're talking to each other as well. So we have an example here. Alan Zabo. How did Ruby kill Oswald with one bullet? Question mark. But that is a question, and it's a question. So we can answer this.
Yeah, we can answer this one. I mean, when you stick a 38 police snub-nose revolver into a man's stomach, you may puncture some organs with that one bullet, which it did. It went through everything. It ripped him apart. But Ruby had what's known as like an assassin's grip on the revolver, where your thumb is over the top of the revolver, and that's so nobody can knock it out of your hand. It's a weird kind of grip that Ruby had. Obviously, he was not inexperienced in this area, but they couldn't wrestle the gun out of his hand, not unlike not being able to wrestle the gun out of Sirhan's hand for the RFK assassination. Similar grip. So, yeah, I mean, he stuck the gun literally into his ribs. Literally into his ribs.
Wasn't that also literally a gangland style shot for the express purpose of going through the heart, the lungs, and other? So he wasn't coming back from that shot.
No. In fact, they worked feverishly, feverishly. The intern who was in the ambulance was pumping his heart stupidly to resuscitate his heart, and the blood was shooting out of the wound, he was like the Sunday morning or the Saturday morning intern med student who was in the ambulance. Not to criticize him, he was just a med student, but he was furiously giving him cardiac pumps with his hands, which you're not supposed to do, because it was forcing the blood out of the wound, and probably shortened his life also.
And that's, I guess, one of those that I think everybody knew he was dead, but it's like, how do you react? They know so much more now.
Think about LBJ. I mean, LBJ calls up and gets Crenshaw on the blower, and he tells him, "I want a deathbed confession." There's a man in there with a revolver sticking out of the back of his pants, who is obviously LBJ's man. I presume it was Secret Service, but maybe not. And he was there to take a deathbed confession, quote unquote, from Oswald if he squawked. And Crenshaw, was denounced and ridiculed for this for many, many years, until he was rescued by the hospital operator, who vouched for him finally that LBJ had called up and spoken to Crenshaw. But he was denounced for this, Crenshaw, for many years. He sued the AMA. He sued the doctors, these wonderful Parkland doctors that everybody reveres, who made a mockery of him. Finally, Trauma Room 1, the book came out, and you could read about Crenshaw's lawsuits and things of that nature, of how he spoke to LBJ on the phone.
Or you could watch our episode.
Maybe it's in the episode. I don't remember. It could be in the episode.
I think we did talk
about on Crenshaw, you talk about. Yeah, I think
we did a whole episode because
okay. I know it sounded familiar.
Didn't they smear his name, and he had
to
get it all?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
defamation.
he did one. He won against the AMA, American Medical Association, through their magazine was where they were doing the smearing. Not that it was a scientific thing. It was the AMA magazine, a journal, whatever it was.
Okay. And somebody asked this ahead of time on locals. In general, I save the locals questions to the end where we have locals exclusive time for the after party. But because they asked very specifically, this is a little longer one. A next JFK Q&A per the Harvey and Lee PDF book by John Armstrong that you recommended, and I think I actually uploaded to locals. I want to pursue any researching that one took up the trail of Lee, the one not shot by Ruby, who left the TSBD building in a Rambler station wagon, shot Tippit, got released from Dallas police at the Texas Theater balcony while they caught long sleeve brown shirt Harvey, the patsy, in the orchestra Rose. Did the CIA disappear him? Boy, there's a lot of statements in there versus a question.
Statements versus questions. First of all, I just want to tell you two things. All of these, and the answers are just my opinions. That you could have your own opinions on this, and I don't begrudge anyone for having their own opinions. The Armstrong book, Harvey and Lee, has a million facts in it, which is brilliant, but it also has a lot of harebrained theories. So again, when you say the Armstrong book, there's a trillion facts in that book, and there are doubles of Oswald. His whole thing is he traces them as if they're parallel characters, and they operate in unison, but in parallel for months and years. I don't buy into that entire crazy storyline, and I don't even think he does. I think he's showing you that there were 2 or 3 Oswalds operating simultaneously in all these different theaters. And I don't mean movie theaters. I mean theaters like the Soviet Union, theaters like in New Orleans, theaters like in Texas, that showed parallel Oswalds. I don't know if it's the same phony Oswald. It could be others. It could be other people who are doubling as him as well. As for that particular theory, somebody may have gotten into a Rambler. I don't know who it was. We know that Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested in the Texas Theater. That is the guy we perceive to have been assassinated by Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby famously, we'll get into this later when we get into Nixon, but I'll give you a little bit about it. Nixon obviously had Jack Rubenstein under his, when he was in the Rackets Committee. Jack Rubenstein was an informer, a paid informer for Nixon, not personally for Nixon, but as part of the Rackets Committee. He was brought onto the payroll by Richard Nixon. And when Ruby shot Oswald, Nixon famously said, "I know that man, that's Jack Rubenstein." But he also, if you go deeper into it, which we will go into, that's just a superficial statement he made on November 24th. The situation becomes more interesting because Nixon later extrapolated that he got Ruby a job working for Carlos Marcello, who was LBJ's man. And he said Jack Ruby worked for LBJ. And he added that on, which a lot of people have never reported, that Ruby was gotten a job to work for Carlos Marcello. And Nixon had his own mob guys. Nixon was mobbed up. Kennedy was mobbed up. And so was LBJ. And LBJ, according to Nixon, LBJ's guy was Carlos Marcello. And the assassination of Oswald was carried out by Ruby via Carlos Marcello, which is where the money came from to pay Jack Ruby the $50,000 for the hit on Oswald. But he may have been there in the Texas Theater that night. Afternoon, rather. I mean, there's a report, and I'll just extrapolate on this until questions form or whatever. There was a guy named George Applin. George Applin was in the Texas Theater. He sat 6 rows from the back of the theater. George said there was a man in the back row, standing in the back row of the theater during the arrest of Oswald. He was afraid. He testified for the Warren Commission. He never identified that man in the back row. He said he was too afraid to identify him, didn't know who he was. Anyway, 1979, he tells the Dallas Morning News that man was Jack Ruby. And he was petrified, he said. He didn't want to say anything at the time. He immediately identified him. as Jack Ruby, and I believe that Jack Ruby was there to finish off Oswald right then and there, to end this thing. He begins to stalk him that night at the police station, Saturday and Sunday, and finally assassinates him on Sunday. But being said, Maurice McDonald, the Dallas police officer who arrests Oswald, claims that Oswald pulled out his .38, fired a shot into him, but his hand, this part of his thumb here, got into the hammer, and that was what stopped the bullet from hitting him or going off or anything.
But somehow he was never charged with resisting arrest, never charged with attacking a police officer or assault or anything else. That is a very odd thing.
Very odd, but he is considered Maurice Nick McDonald, I think his name was. He is the guy that claims that Oswald hit him in the face with a punch. Of course, Oswald turns out to have a black and blue eye, and was probably the reverse happened, that McDonald punched Oswald in the face. But you've got a lot of stuff going on at that theater. You know, you've got Johnny Brewer, who is the shoe salesman up the road at Hardy Shoes, who claims to have been seeing Oswald running down Jefferson, going into the theater. You've got Julia Postal, who went postal. She was the ticket taker in the booth, who claims that she didn't see Oswald go in. Oswald had money for the ticket. Oswald, I think, claimed that nobody was in the booth, so he just walked in. Butch Burroughs, who was running the candy stand, says that Oswald was there moments before 1 o'clock, not at 1:45, as the Warren Commission said. He was in there, according to the Warren Commission, just so people understand. He says, Warren Commission says he went into the theater at 1:45. He's arrested at 1:51. That means he's in there for 6 minutes. Okay. Butch Burroughs says otherwise. Butch Burroughs says Oswald was there for the previews, coming attractions. He's there at 1 o'clock, and that's when Oswald would go to a theater normally. People say, well, he switched seats. I switch seats. I do it all the time. And when I go to a theater, I don't like this seat. I'm moving around. I go, and I'm not there to meet anybody. I'm just saying I move around, which is what Oswald did in that theater. Butch Burroughs says he got popcorn for Oswald. Okay. You could look at this thing really darkly, or you could look at it like a guy going to the movies. Any way you want to look at it, the fact that the cops were down on this thing so quickly and arresting him is, well, there he's arrested at 1:51. They have to back up this timeline for him to kill Tippit all the way back. I mean, they got to run this clock in reverse, Eric, for him to kill Tippit and finish it off at 1:15 or whatever time that they said he did this. It's just not possible because he was in that theater.
Fair enough, but you know what? Nate the lawyer's here, and he solved it for us.
Okay, way to go.
And he said Oswald was framed, Jack Ruby was CIA, and JFK is still alive.
Well, I don't know about still alive, but RFK Jr. is alive, and he's got a CIA campaign manager who may be involved in finishing him off, because nobody seems to want to give him Secret Service protection, which I find to be completely bizarre based on what happened to his father, not having Secret Service protection. Thanks, Nick. Not having Secret Service protection. And LBJ finally, after he's shot, orders all candidates. He had no legal right to do this, LBJ. It was later passed by Congress. But LBJ ordered Secret Service to protect all candidates still alive during 1968.
Which makes sense. That's an okay decision.
Yes. Of course, you already finished off the guy he wanted to finish off. What does he care about Humphrey, for that matter?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he already said, I'm going to kill this guy to so many people. I'm going to cut his throat from ear to ear. I mean, the quotes are legendary of what LBJ, various ways he was going to kill RFK. Yet people just, it's a figure of speech. I've never said I'm going to cut somebody's throat from ear to ear. I don't know what kind of figure of speech that is. I mean, that sounds, like you're going to pull it off. And then when he's dead, you just go, oh, well, now, who could have done this? But the reality of it is RFK Jr. right now does not have Secret Service protection, which is really creepy. I'll just put it that way. And he's got a CIA manager. They're talking about Trump's campaign manager, but he's got a CIA campaign manager. So I don't know what's worse.
I don't know. Let me see. Gregory Peterson's a new member. Thank you. Pamela Clifton coming through. Speaking of RFK.
Speaking of RFK, that's his Secret
Happy
Service
Tuesday,
agent.
guys.
Clifton is his bodyguard.
Maybe.
No, that's why she's so close to him. And good job.
Yeah,
Good
she's
job,
watching out
Pamela.
for us too, all the time.
No, I mean, the guy's paying a fortune. I mean, at what point do you get Secret Service protection out of Biden? I mean, it's crazy. Fair is fair. I mean, whatever you want to make on RFK Jr., he's got to have Secret Service protection.
That's obvious. Yeah,
it's obviously absurd.
I mean, I think Bernie Sanders had it.
Of course, everybody had it.
It's like
everyone had it after 68.
Let me see. Dick Dickerson. At the AAA games I went to as a kid, my dad would make one of us kids do food runs. I used to fight with my brother all the time to make him go.
Yeah, of course. Nobody wants to go. Are you kidding? You're there to see the game. These people, it was almost like there was something in the background going on while they were eating Diamondback.
It's a social event.
Yeah. Really, really creepy.
All right. Preach Sister's Kitchen. Question. I believe Roger Craig, one of your favorites that comes up a lot, said the LHO said, don't get Mrs. Payne involved with this. Do you believe he said that? If he did, why would he say that?
Again, people are saying that Oswald said this. There's no record of him saying this. There's nothing in print. The only one who says it is Roger Craig. Whether you believe Roger Craig or not is up to you. I believe some parts of Roger Craig, other parts I don't. So it's a mixed bag. That's a really bold statement to make, bro. It really is a bold statement. Don't get her involved in this. What does that mean? What does that mean? He hates Ruth Payne's guts. Why does he hate my guts, Eric? I tried to get him a job. He hates her guts. She's an arch nemesis. What does he give a shit about? Don't get Mrs. Payne involved in this thing. It's such a red herring. It's such a thing, a low hanging fruit. Don't get her involved in this. And they keep talking about the Rambler. She had a Bel Air, sky blue Bel Air station wagon, Chevy station wagon. She didn't have a fucking Rambler. So all that bullshit about a Rambler. My parents had a Rambler. We had the push button 1964 Rambler station wagon. So I know that car because we had one. That's not the car of Mrs. Payne. Everybody kept linking that Rambler to Mrs. Payne. It's a crock of shit. She was never linked. She had her own. The car that she used drove Marina back from New Orleans to Dallas. She had that car when she was driving up to the secret island in off the coast of Massachusetts that her husband's family owned, which I think we mentioned in the Chappaquiddick episode. But look, it's certain things were said. Roger Craig is Roger Craig, and you can't put all your eggs in anyone's basket for this story. It could be that a lot of people had it out for Roger Craig, and he could have been a hero. It could be both. It's not all black and white, folks. It's not all black and white. I mean, Craig was with Seymour Weitzman when they found the Mauser, but he's not alone. He's got Weitzman with him there finding that Mauser. So there's credit there for Craig.
All right. Got a Rumble rant in here from Tommy C30. Question. Why were JFK and LHO buried so quickly? Was LBJ pushing the burial to get rid of evidence?
What? JFK and who?
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Well, I don't know. What are you supposed to do? Keep him on ice? I mean, JFK was in the rotunda to be viewed. I mean, his wife famously brought in the Green Berets and had them face outward for the first time in a political death, as if to guard. And this is symbolic on her part, but it was he had created the Green Berets. And she had them stand facing away from the casket as if to protect from outside forces. And I always thought that was fascinating. That was from Jackie Kennedy doing that. But yeah, I mean, he was lying in state in the rotunda. Lee Harvey Oswald. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, he was.
That was kind of clear what happened.
Yeah,
I mean, what are
you going to do? I mean, think about the body, though. Think about the Dallas police who go over there and put the fingerprints on the rifle when the rifle comes back from Quantico, from the FBI, and it's flown back in a jet fighter, and it's flown there in a jet fighter. Comes back and they tell the Dallas police, "Bad news, boys. There's no prints on any part of this rifle." Well, we're gonna do something about that. Hang on a second. Where's that funeral home? Oh, it's on Jefferson. Let's get in the car. the funeral director says they asked him to leave. They came in with the rifle. The corpse was in there and already embalmed in the funeral home. How do we know the fingerprints were taken off? Because he said he had to use alcohol to get the ink off of Oswald's fingers after they left. So that's where the fingerprints come from on the stock. Are literally the detectives going over there and taking them from a dead body, for Christ's sakes.
So I guess they had him out long enough then.
Long enough, right? They said, hold on, we may need that corpse, depending on what happens in Quantico, Virginia. Hold on to that corpse. Don't bury him yet.
All right. Rake Flyer question. Did Lee ever talk about any lifelong ambitions or plans he had for the future?
I don't know, but he wanted to play baseball. Muret, I think it was Charles Muret, played in the St. Louis organization, was an infielder, speaking of baseball, played in the Cardinal minor leagues. He was his closest cousin, and Oswald loved baseball more than anything, knew the game inside and out. And Muret, his first cousin, as I said, was a not semi-pro. He was he was in the St. Louis organization. Could have come up. He didn't come up. I think he was an infielder or a center fielder. I forget. But yeah, he wanted to play baseball.
Okay, this is another good question. What happened to Oswald's kid?
The two kids?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess they just grew up in
Texas. They're in Texas. I think one of them lives with Marina. I don't know where the other one lives, but I think they're both in Texas.
I wonder if they had full careers, what they did. I mean, by now they could be retired, actually. So it'd be interesting.
Well, I think Max Good knows more about that, about what happened to the kids. Nobody really wants to bother them because they had such a brutal upbringing where every November 22nd in school in Dallas, they'd all turn and point at them and they'd have to be removed from the classroom by the teacher to avoid, being castigated by the other students in the lower grades. So they had a really difficult time growing up.
Wow, I didn't know that happened.
Yeah.
That would be one of those that I'm surprised that they didn't change their name and move. I mean, if I could think of any reason that I'd want to change my name, that might be one.
Well, she does remarry to Porter, and then she becomes Oswald Porter, and they become Porters. So there is a name change for them too.
Okay,
they become Porters.
Miles 5681 question: what did Ruby expect to get out of publicly assassinating Oswald? Other than the payment?
He was trying to get out of not getting killed himself because he had already been paid $50,000 by the mob, and I think he pulled a chicken switch Friday night, Saturday night, and finally, after a bunch of phone calls that he made, trying to get Oswald out of the line of fire. On Friday night, he calls up. On Saturday night, he calls up, and I think on Sunday morning, he's identified by a Dallas patrol officer, a young kid who's manning the phones at the precinct or at the jail where he is. And Ruby kept calling up saying, Oswald's going to be killed. You got to get him out of there. Someone's coming to kill that son of a bitch. He kept calling up. The third call he made, which was on Sunday, the kid said, "Is this Jack Ruby?" He slammed the phone down. The kid recognized his voice. And Ruby realized the jig was up, Eric, and he had to do what he was paid for, which is the elimination of Lee Harvey Oswald. He had stalked him Friday. I think, if you listen to what was said by George Applin, I think he was there to finish him off in the Texas theater. If that was Jack Ruby, because I believe that Ruby and Crawford, this is my theory, that Ruby and Crawford were the ones who killed Tippit. We had shown in the episode how close Jack Ruby's apartment was to the crime scene of Tippit's murder. And Crawford did flee the next day saying they're not going to pin this on me. And the Warren Commission famously said, pin the assassination of the president on you? What are you, insane? What are you talking about? He realized he had misspoke. And it was really, I believe, him saying they're not going to pin this on me, the Tippit murder. Why would he be fleeing the JFK murder? That's solved. That's Oswald. And he obviously opened his mouth, and the Warren Commission didn't know what to do with that. And he was just grilled about Jack Ruby's phone book that he had in his possession. But he did flee and was captured by the FBI up by the northern border of the United States, up by northern Michigan. and brought back to Texas. There's a lot to be learned from Crawford's behavior that day. And I believe the jacket, as we have shown in that episode, the Crawford episode, and as I've done
Tippett too.
And the Tippett episode too, that jacket belonged to Crawford, because 4 days later they found Oswald's jacket on the windowsill at the Texas School Book Depository where he had left it after work.
Yeah, but that was normal. Oswald liked having, multiple wallets, multiple jackets.
Yeah, well, his wife said he only had 2 jackets. And that jacket that they found at the crime scene had a dry cleaner's ticket in it. And they went to every single dry cleaners in Texas to no avail. And it's because that dry cleaner's ticket was from a place called Hollywood, California, where Crawford had bought the jacket and lived before he moved to Dallas.
Pamela said this, and the timing is interesting. Whenever we have Robert Groden on, or if we contact him for a show, ask him about those daughters. He knows them and Marina.
Yeah, I will. I just don't want to go down that road. It's not really fair. I really don't want to ruffle their lives any more than it's been ruffled.
Sure.
I really don't want to. I don't want to do it. It's not fair to them, and it doesn't help us at all. It's just some stuff that people want to know for gossip's sake. I'm not interested in that.
Well, I'd love to talk to Marina. Don't get me wrong. Now the kids, I get it. They're too young. What would they know? But Marina, there's definitely questions I know you have for her from the Soviet Union time and all that. That would be very interesting.
May still be working.
Could be. Still interested. Tell me, guys, here. I heard the story of the white socks during the JFK assassination. It was done to determine who was who. So did Oswald have white socks on?
I have no idea what you're talking about, bro. I'm wearing white socks right now, but I don't know about that. But the White Sox, play in Chicago, and Jack Ruby was from Chicago. So it could be a question of it.
Okay.
I mean, every cop in the force wore white socks, so it might get a little confusing. There was a famous thing in Get Smart where the code for the day, you had to go pick up a Soviet spy, a defector from the airport, Maxwell Smart, agent 86. And he says, "Chief, what's the code?" And he says, "Max, it's Mets win doubleheader." He goes, "Mets win doubleheader? That's impossible, Chief." "I know, that's why it's a code." So he goes to JFK Airport, and people are sitting there with the Daily News and New York Post. And on the back of the page, it says Mets win doubleheader, right? So he goes up to the spy, and the code word is Mets win doubleheader. He's saying this to various people to see if it's the guy. And everyone's going, "Yeah, can you believe it? The Mets won a doubleheader. It's insane." Anyway, I just want to put that in there.
Love it. Mean Gene in Florida. Question. Mark, your view on the Oswald backyard photo with rifle. Faked, shadows seem off. Self-incrimination?
Yeah, I originally, when I was growing up, I thought it was a real photo. But after I've been hipped by a bunch of people, photo experts, including Groden's work and Oliver's and a bunch of other people, that it was faked. So, yeah, I changed my opinion on that about 10, 15 years ago, that it was, or 10 years ago, that it was obviously faked. And then you got Roscoe White, who was a police photographer. He was the guy, I think, who did it. And then his kid said he found his diary. His kid tried to make money off of Roscoe White by never producing a diary that he said was his dad's. There's a lot of kids who try to make money off of these peripheral figures from the JFK assassination. By the way, I try to take it with a grain of salt when I hear their stories. But I think it was faked, and Oswald said it was faked. That they put his head on his body, and he said, "I do that work myself. I know how that work is done."
By the way, I ran a poll in the chat just to see, and asked the question: was Oswald involved in the JFK assassination? And the answer is no, at 56%.
Yeah, it's a limited hangout by the CIA, where about 10, 15 years ago, they began to say there was Oswald and other people now. So they realized that this was such an uphill battle, pushing this rock up the hill, this Sisyphean situation that they found themselves in. So they began to do another limited hangout. Their limited hangout became Oswald was involved on whatever level, and there were others involved who were never going to catch, but at least we got him. That's the kind of a spin they limited hangout. And Rob Reiner did the same thing after his retarded podcast, he said the same thing at the end, that Oswald was one of the conspirators and probably opened the door to let them in. He actually said that on Jefferson Morley's show. This is part of the limited hangout by the CIA. But I believe he was a patsy. He said he was a patsy. All the things that he did overseas were real. He was a patriot. He was a Marine. He was, working for ONI. I think the CIA had a file on him, not because they liked him, but because he was, doing these things and was overseas doing undercover stuff. And I think he was also on the FBI payroll. I think we've proven that as an informant. I think he is who he is, and I think they needed a patsy. And if it would have been someone else in Chicago, it would have been Thomas Arthur Valley in Chicago if that had been successful there. So I think he was the guy in the right place at the wrong time.
All right. Mark Duffy wants to know, how did Lee Harvey Oswald get on Dallas police radar?
Well, he really wasn't on their radar. He was more on the FBI radar because of Marina Oswald. Hosty was assigned to shadow, as anybody would expect, a Soviet citizen whose family has intelligence background in Minsk. It would be ridiculous if nobody followed her. So Hosty was assigned the job of following and writing reports on Marina Oswald. So he knocked on Ruth Payne's door a number of times. That was his job as an FBI agent. I don't begrudge Hosty for doing that. I mean, you have to do it. You have to do it. And they had a policy when they did this honeypot kind of thing, where they would force these domestic disputes upon their mate and then get separated from them and have a free hand to operate in the United States. But Angleton was hip to that. And he told them in this, the 13 defectors that Angleton had created, I believe, were told that these marriages, if you do marry someone and you do bring someone back, which they were not opposed to, you just can't be able to cut them loose. And that's why Oswald and her were fighting all the time, was her attempt to break free from him and be able to have freedom to operate in the United States. She then moves in with Ruth Payne, and that becomes a mutual spy admiration society there, because Payne is an intelligence operative and so is Marina. So they're doing the same thing, but it's two women instead of her and Lee Harvey Oswald at that point.
All right. Mean Gene in Florida again. Question. Just received the final analysis. Mantic. Have you read it? Opinion, please, on Mantic and Jerome Corsi.
Just complete frauds. I mean, Mantic is an X-ray guy examining phony X-rays. And Corsi, despite people's support of him, and I've read some of his books and I like a lot of it, this looks like a money grab to me, because there's nothing there. I mean, his theories have been debunked, and he's cherry picking stuff from best evidence, from what I understand, from the videos that I've seen. He's cherry picking. It's kind of like Eric and I talked about Roger picking out LBJ's books and putting them into his book about LBJ, Roger Stone. Mantic is a guy who believes out of the blue. Now, Mantic never says any of this stuff in his interviews and book that James DiEugenio did. And I talked to James about that. And Mantic says that Kennedy was shot twice in the head and then twice in the front. I think it's 3 or 4 shots to the head. And I simply said, anybody who's got 4 rifle shots to the head is not going to have a head on its shoulders any longer. And I asked Jim about it, and he said, well, it must be new because he's never told me this before. So
he was very diplomatic about it.
He was very diplomatic.
I think he said recently discovered or something.
Recently discovered, yeah. Because Mantic is in Destiny Betrayed, the documentary, and he's in the book. And none of this is in the book or the documentaries. And that was 2 years ago. So whatever Corsi's thing is, it reminds me of the Secret Service agent hooking up with our friend out of Chicago, the attorney, and finding the magic bullet, $3.99 last year.
All right. BTK said the poltergeist of Dan Rather is returning to CBS.
Well, I mean, somebody was going crazy because I went into the history of What's the Frequency, Kenneth, and it started way before What's the Frequency, Kenneth. That was the culmination of What's the Frequency, Kenneth. He was kidnapped by a cab driver in Chicago years before and driven around. There was a bunch of What's the Frequency, Kenneths. I don't get into that can of worms, but he had intel people all over him, Dan Rather. And I think they wanted to keep him on the reservation, so to speak, and they did. They to this day hasn't buckled. And I think sometimes they have to put the fear of God into you, especially if you're a powerful news person like Dan Rather. They probably think we got to scare the shit out of this guy every once in a while because he may go off the reservation on us.
No, and he'd never make up a story about National Guard or anything like that.
No, of course. That was a good one.
Yeah. He was a thorough journalist.
Back and to the left. I mean, what Eric is alluding to is a George Bush thing, but he famously claims to have seen the Zapruder film on day one and said that he shot from behind in the back of the head and his head goes forward and down. That's a lie. He lied about that for years. And even when he went on the college circuit in the late 70s, the students in the auditorium would all chant in unison, back and to the left, to mock him, because the kids knew at that point, after it was released by Bob Groden on Geraldo's show with Dick Gregory, which we'll get into when we talk to Bob.
All right. And somebody is wanting to argue about this. Question: Marina states she took the photo of Oswald decades later, so how can it be faked? Or are you saying Marina took different photo?
Okay. Again, with the statement question, is that some sort of mental thing? I don't understand what that is. Mark, you obviously murdered Richard Nixon. How do you feel about him politically now? Anyway, she had contradictory statements all the time. She said things at the beginning that she contradicted herself and changed her stuff later on. If you look at her early statements about anything, she later said he didn't kill the president. And I think she was under enormous pressure at the beginning. Put it that way.
All right. Mean Gene in Florida again. Mean Gene's really
Mean Gene on a big roll. Whoa.
I appreciate it. What's the government's excuse for Oswald being in FBI files and visits from Agent Hosty?
Okay, these are two separate things. The FBI files, he was an FBI informant, had a 201 file and pay. Hosty, separately, I know this is confusing. Hosty was assigned to tail and deal with reports of his wife as an espionage Soviet, whatever she is, in Dallas. Two separate things. And he famously gets pissed off and leaves a note for Hosty to leave my wife alone. And so would you. If you were on the payroll of look at his point of view is what I always thought. He's on the payroll of the FBI, right? And he's an informer. And they're hassling his wife. So you think, I'm already working for you douchebags. Why are you hassling my wife? And I think that's the genesis of the note that he leaves for Hosty, and that's why he was pissed off, in my opinion.
That makes sense. Kim Opperman with the one I haven't heard before. Question: any chance that the real Harvey Oswald made it out alive and is living his best life in hiding?
Well, how old would he be right now? Let's see. He was born in 1939.
His brothers all died, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean,
didn't Robert die? They lived quite old too.
Yeah,
like in the 90s. So
he'd be 61. He'd be 81. He'd be in his 80s. It's possible. I don't know if he made it out alive. And where did he go? I mean, to New Orleans and
I don't know.
I think he had a fait accompli that something bad was going to happen to this guy. And I think he was so into being a spy and a counter-espionage agent. I mean, his favorite show as a kid was I Led Three Lives, and I Was a Communist for the FBI was another one. These were famous books at the time, TV shows and movies. And those were what he was hooked on. I mean, he wanted to be an undercover operative, an agent, FBI, ONI, whatever it was. That was they played spy all the time, him and his friends in New Orleans. They went down to the docks and had like attache cases. James Bond was the biggest thing in novel form. They were reading James Bond novels at the time. He was reading them. He was telling his friends, you know, this is the age of 13, 12. He's reading From Russia with Love or Thunderball, whichever one came out first. I don't remember the order of them, but he was into being a spy. That was the biggest thing going on back then for kids, was spying. You know, in the Cold War, Eric. You know.
Yeah, it was romantic.
Yeah.
I mean, all right, Nain Rouge. Question. 2 photos of LHO show him holding the rifle and pistol used later. Have the photos been proved as false and manufactured?
We think so. Yeah, I think it's currently the common acceptance is that they were faked, based on all the science that we have today and shadow analysis and the guns and the magazines and everything else. In fact, there's a photo of Roscoe White standing there in the same exact position with the guns, with the magazine and everything. And he said, yeah, we were reenacting. It's just a crock. It's just so funny because they said we were reenacting the photo to see how it was done. And I'm going, really, bro? Really? You're reenacting?
You need to do that.
Why would you need to do that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Roscoe White said, who was, you know, working in Dallas Police and the photo division there.
Jeez. All right. Eleanor
Sometimes
Cahill.
it is. Sometimes a dog is a dog. You know, it is what it is.
Sure. Eleanor Cahill makes a good point. Question. If Oswald didn't stop home for a gun, he would have reached earlier than 1 p.m. missing Tippett's death, right?
If Oswald didn't stop home for a gun, again, this is another
Actually, that's a weird,
statement question. This seems to be these statement questions. We presume he stopped home for a gun. He would have reached earlier than 1 p.m. Okay. He went home from work like you do. Eleanor, you go home from work. You now decide, I'm going to the movies. You grab your coat, you change your shirt. You're a 22-year-old kid in the state of Texas where everybody has a gun. I know this is hard to understand. I don't think
that. I think it's
no. I'm not
oddly.
saying for her specific. What's that?
No, I think it's worded oddly. I think she's trying to say that because they said that he was at the theater earlier than expected. She's saying that, yeah, he could very well, if he didn't, you know, supposedly go get a gun and all that, could have made it to the theater with no problem.
Right. I'm addressing the bigger question, not her question, but this bigger question about which comes up all the time. If he's so innocent, why did he have a gun? Comes up all the time. Again, these blanket statements from urban dwellers about people who live in the great state of Texas and being a soldier and someone ex-soldier and someone who lives there at the age of 22, going out on a Friday night in Texas. I know this is hard for people to understand. Only my Texas friends can explain this to you, how not unusual it is to have a gun in the state of Texas. I just can't explain it to you if you live in the city of Philadelphia or the inner city of somewhere, New York or LA, and you just think that a guy who's 22 carrying a handgun is guilty because he's got a handgun. I can only let the people who follow the show from Texas explain it to you.
And by the way, you're going to get really annoyed on this one, but trust me on this. He wasn't a former soldier. He was a former Marine, and they do.
Right. No, I didn't say ex-Marine. That's why I said soldier. I mean, soldier in other ways too. I mean, soldier as soldiering on and being a guy who was an infiltrator into the Soviet Union. But whatever the reason is, that he was going, to me, it was a guy grabbing his gun on a Friday night to go out and not to shoot anybody. But when you're 22 and you're 5'6" or 7 or 8, and you're not the biggest guy in the world, and there's shit going on, you might you put your handgun in your waistband and take it with you. I mean, what is the point of him leaving his handgun in his rooming house? Why would you have a handgun?
Yeah, it depends. I don't know.
Okay.
For all I know, we could have had it at work.
Yeah.
Bertil Knudsen, question. When, in your opinion, was it decided to make LHO a patsy, and by whom?
It's probably a couple of years before, if it had gone down in Dallas. I think they had patsies, as I said. Thomas Arthur Valley in Chicago was a patsy. There were patsies in every city, Mr. Knudsen, and he was just the one that was in Dallas. I mean, Dallas as we have indicated, was the last stop on the assassination train. So he's not the ultimate patsy, because if it had happened in Tampa, we had those Latinos from Cuba who was set up to be a patsy. If it happened in Chicago, there was the I was going to say ex-Marine, but you got me on this one. He was a Marine, Thomas Arthur Valley. I think he was a Marine. He would have been the patsy in Chicago if they had been successful in that assassination attempt. So, as for the date of Oswald's thing, I think it was he was on the radar. And I think when the other plots failed, he was the guy who was in Dallas.
And I think you've said before, but there's odds are that there could have been one or two other quote patsies in Dallas, even. I mean, just
yes. I mean, I think
this one will work here.
Yeah, I think also in Dallas, Buell Wesley Frazier was being set up to be a patsy. They had seized his British Enfield rifle and his ammo, and they had threatened him with the electric chair in Huntsville, Texas. They had done a lie detector test on him twice. He was accused of assassinating the president by the arresting detective in Dallas. So he was being set up, Frazier, and he was then pressured to flip and become the curtain rod guy.
Michael Payne could have been.
Michael Payne, that would have been a tough one because he was a Brahmin. But Frazier for sure. There was very little doubt. They just scared the living shit out of Frazier, and he was next in line for the patsy crown if he didn't cooperate with them, and the Oswald thing fell apart. But yeah, I mean, Frazier worked in the same building and was more of a marksman. He used to go to the rifle range quite a bit, and he had that British Enfield, which again, it might not have been the same one, but they did find one on the roof of the Dallas Texas School Book Depository.
All right. Question: is there any evidence that Tippit meeting LHO or of Tippit meeting LHO, any association between them?
I've never seen anything set in concrete about that. I mean, I know all these stories and I've heard all these stories, but there's never, ever been any solid evidence that they ever interacted. I've heard all the different theories and stories about it, but to me, I've never seen anything tangible to link the two together, ever. I mean, even people believing that Tippit drove by and honked the horn on the car. Not true, because Tippit was somewhere else at the time. There was a different car number that honked the horn in front of his rooming house, according to his landlady. Two guys were in the car. They came by in a patrol car, honked the horn. And that was not Tippit, although people have conflated that to be Tippit. It was not. And I've never seen anything that links the two together.
All right. Athena Nike. Why isn't the smoking gun for LHO's innocent simply the negative paraffin test? If that test result is impossible, why not just be checkmate?
There's a couple of reasons. One is it's not a foolproof test. Two,
soap and water.
yeah. I don't think it takes it off, but it does do something to it. So it's not the end all and be all of ballistic tests. Let me put it that way.
All right. Al Gonzalez, back from Barcelona today, had drinks with a State Department / military intel man who retired there. Said he and most of his colleagues agree that Oswald framed, but saying it in America is dangerous.
Yeah, it's definitely dangerous when there's still, Mike Pompeo out there scaring the shit out of Trump and not releasing the final documents. And I mean the final documents. People perceive this to be 1 trillion documents that are still left at the bottom of the barrel. It's I believe it was documents about foreign governments, maybe even Barcelona, and different intelligence connections that we have with foreign governments. I believe that's what's left in the so-called JFK files. And I don't think it's Barcelona so much as it is Mexico. We ordered Mexican intelligence authorities to torture people who we were trying to frame Oswald around in Mexico City. There's a lot of damning evidence, not evidence, there's a lot of damning things that we made the Mexican intelligence people do on our behalf that I believe would be embarrassing today to the Mexican government. Let me just give you a generic, broad answer to that, because there is torture of Sylvia Duran that was ordered by us. Sylvia Duran was the secretary and receptionist at the embassy in Mexico City, the Cuban embassy, and we ordered her torture. And there's things in there that would still be an embarrassment, I believe, to the Mexican authorities.
All right, well, since we just had
and other countries too. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, and since we just got a super chat from Al has threatened to see us in West Palm Beach, and I'm hoping that he actually comes to our meetup that is literally in 16 days, or no,
what?
18 days.
Oh, 18 days. Scaring the hell out of me.
May 18th, we have a meetup in West Palm Beach, and some of you might recognize that silhouette down there with the glasses and the crazy ass flaming hair. That is Viva Fry, and he is the first ever recipient of Friends of America's Untold Stories Award, and he will also be at the meetup in West Palm Beach coming up in May.
You can ask him questions. Maybe you got some questions for him.
He's definitely a JFK expert, not.
Dude, remember that time we had him on the show?
Yes, and we've got so many complaints of people. Why did you have
went berserk on that episode? He didn't know anything. I mean, not that he should. I mean,
no, but that was perfect though, because he is asking questions and they're getting a lot of information, which is fine. It cracks me up. I actually had somebody complain about that with the interview I just did with Nick Schreck about Charles Manson, and they were writing these comments like, "This interviewer should know more." And finally I responded and I go, "This is not a monologue. This is an interview. If I knew everything, why would I need Nick Schreck to be here? Why would I want an expert to be on the show?" So sometimes people just kind of blow my mind on that type of scenario.
Right. I mean, it's weird because we have shows where we do stories on things and it's not an interview, but we also have episodes that are interviews, rarely, but we do them. So it can be a little confusing.
Right. But you're not going to bring somebody on like Jim DiEugenio, and it's not a competition to say, "Oh, I know as much or more than Jim." No, you're trying to get information from Jim, or why would he be there? It seems silly. Or Jeff Shepard, which we just did. I mean, you're learning from Jeff every second about Watergate.
I mean, people think I'm interrupting these people. I'm really doing it for the audience's benefit by asking. I may know the answer to what I'm saying, but I want him or the person, DiEugenio or Jeff, to explain some obscure person that I know and he thinks I know, but for the audience's sake, which is why I interrupt these people. It's a style of interviewing I do intentionally for people at home who don't know what the F the guy's talking about.
Yeah, especially in the weeds. But either way, there's a lot of subjects that Viva Fry does know about.
Yeah, that's right.
and
he apparently knows about fishing in Palm Beach now. So
yes, he does. Sometimes successfully and sometimes not.
Yeah.
Depends if there's an alligator around. He might lose his catch.
Oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be a good one.
It's going to be fantastic. There's a QR code. So if you're leaning back, you're watching the TV and you're like, you know what? I don't feel like going to the computer. You can point your phone at the TV with your camera. And it'll save the location. There's also a link in the description if you guys want to come by. Hope to see you. We're about 2/3 sold out, and I haven't put it out widely for the Viva Barnes audience, which I probably will be doing tomorrow because it'll be May. And I recommend getting in now before we sell out. When they come
RFK Jr. may show up. Who knows? It could be other celebrities that show up.
Could be.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I mean, Palm Beach has a lot of people running around there who are fans of the show. Miami does too, which is about 50 miles to the south. But maybe I could take in a Marlins Brewers game. I could see on the schedule. I may be able to get into a game on Monday. There's a Marlins game down there. But that's already, I have to cross off Chase Field from my bucket list now of hitting every stadium in the country. So I've already hit the Marlins Stadium. So I don't know. Maybe I'll just go for the love of the game.
Okay. There's always that. All right. Elizabeth Borson. I love history. I love hearing your program discuss beyond what we have been told. Thank you for all your riveting, in-depth eye openers.
That's not a question about
Thank
JFK, about Oswald. What the
But
hell's
it's
going on
cash.
here, Elizabeth?
Okay, question or cash? No, but thank you, Elizabeth.
Question of cash. Like I said, when I was covering Sam Kinison at Madison Square Garden, he brought out this dwarf in a wheelchair who was his sidekick. I forget the guy's name. Maybe some Kinison feels know this, but he was touring with this dwarf in a wheelchair, and the bit that he did before 18,000 people in Madison Square Garden was, "You've seen all the telethons, haven't you?" And he says, "Yes." And he says, "Have they given you a cure?" And he said, "No." And he says, "Wouldn't you rather have the cash?" He goes, "Yeah, I'd rather have the cash." He says, "Well, what would you like?" He goes, "I'd rather have the cash or the cure, one or the other." So he got 18,000 people to chant, "Cash or the cure, cash or the cure, cash or the cure," while this dwarf was leading it about muscular dystrophy.
Okay.
So I just thought I'd put that in there. I don't know what that has to do with the show, but it reminded me of that night with Sam Kinison.
For the
We will get an episode at some point, and I will retell that story about the dwarf who toured with Kinison.
Yeah, we might have a name then because I'll have time to.
Yeah, I know the names. I forget his name. I know. I used to know his name.
All right, Brian Press, question. Will we ever find out the real story about the JFK assassination? Just wondering.
Well, I don't know what the real story is. Real in what way? Who actually pulled a trigger? Real? Or the fact that the amount of information we now have is enough for us to know what happened, when it happened, where it happened, and who it happened to, and why it happened. I mean, if you talk to Nixon people and Nixon himself, he believes it was because of the Bay of Pigs debacle and some other JFK type things, a combination of the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Bay of Pigs. As for motivation, this is Nixon saying that. So there's somebody who knows a little bit more than me, which we'll get into when we do the Nixon episodes. We're going to get into Nixon's take on the Kennedy assassination, which is fascinating because he was nervous about the CIA because he believed they killed the guy he ran against. When he gets killed, JFK, Nixon's stock rises because he is the survivor of a duo that was immortalized in the election in 1960. So because of the demise of his partner, so to speak, Nixon, who was on the balls of his ass politically, his stock rises, oddly enough, because of the death of JFK.
Yeah, my personal feeling is that no, we're never going to know everything that happened. It's just too much noise, to find the actual signal. Maybe we'll get a general idea, but there's no way we're going to know all the players and all the details. It's just too much garbage has been thrown in there to ever completely figure it out.
Right, but I agree. But on the flip side, there's so much we know now that we didn't know 45 years ago. I mean, the immense amount of knowledge that we have is enormous. You know how much we've garnered if we had listened to the Warren Commission in 1964. Think about how much we've learned since 1964. It's an enormous amount. The phony autopsy, the Jack Ruby connection to Nixon and the mob, and all the different things that we've learned.
That there are three tramps, and I'm still getting emails about
the three tramps who actually were tramps. When I first met Eric, I said to him, if everything's a conspiracy, nothing's a conspiracy. And there are things that I can't just agree with because you think that's your favorite conspiracy. I'm sorry if I looked at something and I don't buy it. Again, if I bought into every single conspiracy, I'd be a nutbag. There's a lot of this stuff that has been resolved. And the three tramps are one of the things that's been resolved.
Here's nothing resolved. Doug Beatty, dwarf in the wheelchair.
Yes, thank you, Doug Beatty. Thank you. Thank you, Doug Beatty. Thank you.
All right.
Cash or the cure. Cash or the cure.
Okay, this is one of those borderline statements. But anyway, why do you think Oswald was drinking a Coke immediately following the assassination? Did he watch the motorcade? He was politically active, after all. I mean, could have been just drinking a Coke.
Again, these are statements within a question. This is an old trick by deep state operatives, not to suggest that George Mendez is a deep state operative, but this is a trick by a lot of different ways to slice and dice a cake. He was drinking a Coke because he drank a Coke every day with his lunch. He got change from the secretary to put into the Coke machine, and he was having a Coke because he was eating downstairs in the domino room. The domino room being the integrated lunchroom for the different nationalities. He ate with them, if that's what you mean by being politically active. He was an anti-segregationist, but people had different causes of their own, and that was one of his causes. He was an anti-segregationist. So he ate with the blacks, and he also refused to be segregated on the New Orleans trolleys, where he sat with them on the trolley, and he did it in court when he was arrested in the dispute with Bringuier, Carlos Bringuier in New Orleans. He sat in the black section of the courtroom. What was the other part of the question? The drinking the Coke, and then
he was a political activist. Well, why would he?
Well, I don't know.
Did he watch it? Did he watch the parade? That was.
Did he watch the parade? No, and not everybody did watch the parade.
All right. Bama Boy 78, 79. I can answer this. Do you believe James Files was a shooter? No. Next question.
My statement is anyone who claims to be the shooter is probably not the shooter. That's one of the red flags that goes off in my head.
Unless it's a deathbed confession and they're not getting a
but
book
even
deal
in that
out
case,
of
it may not
if
be
there's
true.
no book deal and there's nothing else and maybe, but it's tough.
There was a deathbed quote unquote confession by E. Howard Hunt, supposedly to his son St. John Hunt, who was a heroin addict at the time and wanted a book deal from his dying dad's statement. So you have to look at these things a little bit more microscopically than just accepting them at face value for everything, especially these book deals.
True. Now, there are some deathbed confessions that are legit. Like we just had one, I think, a week or so ago, that somebody suspected of a murder confessed to the murder and said, "Oh, by the way, you'll find the bodies here." And it turns out they found the bodies there. So
okay, that's a good one.
A good one.
That's a good one. I think it is illegal. Isn't it a legal thing, a deathbed confession? Like it's admissible in court as fact.
Yes,
because it's Nate about that, but I think there's something legal.
I believe so. It's not hearsay.
It's not hearsay, but I think it's also has gravitas as factual.
Because it's an admission against your own interest.
But it's also as you're leaving the earth, which gives it a lot of gravitas.
Yes. But I mean, just the fact that you say I did it, even if it wasn't a deathbed confession, maybe you were just laying there having a cigarette and you said, I did blah, 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 blah. And somebody hear you say that. Well, that is an admission against character. I believe. I'm not a lawyer. Who knows?
Yeah.
Back to, let me see. Big Bill 767 with a 1767 super chat. When LHO lived in New York, it seemed to me that he was well liked and even elected to class council in junior high, had a high IQ, not at all what we've been told. I can't remember the details. True.
Well, not just class council. He was elected president of the class. I mean, so this guy was obviously well liked in the New York City school system, and did have a high IQ.
Gregarious enough
to have people vote for you to be school president or class president, rather. Yeah, I mean, it's not who we were told this guy is, and that lone nut, introverted, quiet. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, the guy was a bookworm, a book reader, but not at all. He was as introverted as any Southerner would be, if that makes any sense.
He wasn't a dumb rube who could barely put his sentence together, like Bill O'Reilly says.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one. Killing Kennedy. That's my favorite
Well, his interview, though, with Tucker. Remember that? When he said that he was just this dumb rube who could barely put his sentence together?
I don't remember that.
Oh, yeah. That's recent. I mean, it's Bill O'Reilly in like 2022,
well,
2023.
Tucker's getting a lot of information from somewhere. He's been going after Pompeo with hooks and tongs, bro. I mean, he better watch himself because they called him, we've discussed, they called him up and threatened him, the lawyers for Pompeo, the next day.
That's why he's going after him, because he's pissed, I'm pretty sure.
But man, oh man, dangerous way to roll.
Well, I mean, it may be the safest way, because if you get it out there and the whole world has heard that, if something happened to me, I happen to have an encounter with such and such.
He also has a father who has a lot of access to friends and old files, who knows a lot about the CIA, and maybe we have an episode someday about it.
It's already out there. Yes.
Wait, what are you saying? We have an episode about Dick Carlson?
We happen to.
You're talking about Tucker Carlson's father?
That's correct.
Oh, that's
and well, I think a couple 100,000 people have watched it and enjoyed it.
Is it really that many? Oh, that's great.
I think it's cool. 200,000, but
what? That's insane, Eric.
So, Scott Bimbo, question: was Ruby's gun ever tied to ballistics match to a tippet?
It was not, and it has nothing to do with the tippet murder weapon. But that being said, I don't know. It could have been shot with it. I don't know
if they ever checked.
Yeah, I don't know if they ever checked it, because there's no gun in the tippet murder. You could check the ballistics, but the tippet murder has like 3 different kinds of bullets. They said it was an automatic. It wasn't a revolver. Ruby's got a revolver. The bullets had Auto 38 stamped on them, but there was 3 different brands of bullets. There were bullets in the ambulance. A guy on the tippet ambulance threw a bullet out of the ambulance that was coming out of his chest. There was a fragment of that the ambulance attendant said he brushed off him. So the tippet ballistics have always been sketchy.
True. Here's one for the oddest question in a while.
Right.
George Mendez wants to know, what type of cologne do you wear, Mark?
I don't wear any cologne. So, yeah, I don't wear any cologne, Mendez. It's just mano a mano cologne.
Nain Rouge, did LHO realize his wife was a honeypot and was spying while in America?
Yes. In fact, they fought about that. She was caught shipping back American magazines to the Soviet Union. She was caught writing letters that he intercepted back to the Soviet Union. He was well aware of it.
All right.
In my opinion, again, those things about the magazines, which he got caught doing that. And again, like I said, she was the mirror flipped image of what he did in Minsk. He did the same thing she was doing in Dallas, in Minsk. He mailed magazines. He read stuff. He wrote down all the tidbits of how the phone system works, the subway system works, the bus system works. That's what he was doing, and she did the same here, because they needed human intelligence. This is before satellites, before Google Earth, before everything. They needed to have boots on the ground to learn how everything physically worked.
Yep, true. Fred Sirocco Perez, question: Mark, why with the technology of 2024, the dictabel of the motorcycle of the presidential motorcade is not analyzed? The analysis took place in 1978. We could know how many shots were fired.
They felt that the technology was fine at that time. I don't know. I mean, what more? They used the technology on the dictabelt, and they felt there was multiple shots heard. It was discredited. It was not discredited. Look, it's, whether you believe the dictabelt or not, it's hard to believe that at this point that was a recording of the assassination, in my humble opinion.
All right. David Parsons, Lee is a ghostwriter for Senator Kennedy of LA.
That's funny.
Or Louisiana. Okay.
Louisiana, yeah. Oh, so that's Senator Kennedy. The other.
Well,
senator.
it took me a second because there is no other one. So, and right. I enjoy watching his YouTube clips when he's questioning people. He's always
it's fantastic.
You're an activist, right?
Right. Now you're still studying. You're still studying Karl Marx. When did you quit being a Marxist?
Let me read this real quickly. Now, is that accurate?
Very good. He's very good.
Mary S. gifted a AUS membership. Thank you, Mary. JMac, question: do you think LHO was supposed to be killed at Texas School Book Depository by a hero cop and something went wrong?
No, I think he was supposed to be
No,
killed at either at home
or the theater.
or in the theater. And eventually he was killed literally in the police station, which I'm sure they would have liked to have avoided.
Yeah, the theater would have probably been a better.
Theater
Oh,
was
he
a
was
better spot.
captured on, on
There
the
were too many
land.
witnesses. I think they're going to try to catch him at home, but that was a hit or miss situation. The jail situation, he was being transferred to the jail next door, the county jail, and the authorities did say they would be an unlimited press conference with him there, an hour plus press conference to answer all questions on Monday. On Monday, that's why Sunday is so important, because on Monday, if he is allowed to be at that press conference, which they guaranteed to all the media, everyone heard them say this, the Dallas authorities, Fritz said it, everyone said it, he would have had a Monday morning press conference next door. And that would have been a shit show. That's why Ruby had to do what he had to do on Sunday.
All right. Let's see. Nain Rouge said, question, why did the intelligence agencies seem to keep LHO at a poverty level, seeming to live hand to mouth? It depends, because I can tell you he lived high on the hog when he was in the Soviet Union.
He lived large in the Soviet Union. I'll tell you that much. I mean, what is he supposed to do? You're trying to stay below the radar. Look at Michael. Michael Payne comes from a lot of money, and he's living below the radar. I mean, how low did the Paynes live compared to the Payne fortune? The Forbes, he shared Forbes fortune. Everyone's living below the radar as part of their cover. That's my belief, and that's always been the belief I've had regarding Oswald and the other operatives. Everyone. I mean, the only guy I could see is living large are some of the people who are above ground and don't need to have the cover stories.
All right. BTK, any ballistic tests available? Any vacuums left?
I don't know about that, but I mean, people like George de Moranchill were also grasping and demanding money all the time too. For his handling of Oswald, he extracted out of J. Walton Moore, I believe, the rights to some oil drilling and oil exploration in Haiti. He got those rights and monetarily and put money in the bank when he handed off Oswald to Ruth Payne and went to Haiti. That was he generated some money for himself on that handoff.
I'm confused about how that relates to ballistics tests, but
I don't know about that. But
I guess the question was, any ballistics tests available
from
any of the scenes or anything else, or any of the weapons, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of ballistic evidence. I mean, none of it adds up to anything, though. I mean, whether it came out of his rifle or if that was his rifle. I mean, think about the picking up of just this Carcano rifle that he could walk into any store and buy a rifle in Dallas without any ID, but they order it through the mail, and he does not sign for the picking up of the parcel of the rifle, which is post office rule number 1. Somehow that rifle leaves the post office without Oswald signing for it.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that still applies, because I actually got a phone call today. Folks, when you use the physical box to send something, if you want to get to Mark, that's fine, but it's care of me. The box is in my name. And I got a nasty little call today saying he needs to come in here and sign. I'm like, he's in California. What do you want? And anyway, so
good cover story. That's a good cover story.
Yeah, if you're going to send something and you want it to be Mark, fine, but you can address it as Mark, care of me,
or you could bring it to the meetup.
Or absolutely bring it to the meetup. And speaking of that, way back to Al. Biden admin was going to ban menthol cigarettes, but changed their mind. Bonnie Ray Williams would be pleased.
That's funny, Al, but he is moving. This is more important to Al Gonzalez. They're moving marijuana from a Schedule 1 drug to number 3 at the highest level the drug has ever been recorded for potency. The timing couldn't be more inappropriate. But again, he's appealing to a micro pot smoking base, like he's doing with the students and like he's done with other different micro bases that he has. But moving this weed thing down to Schedule 3 at this time, again, right before an election. I've never seen something so brazen in my fucking life. Why doesn't he just give them free Cheech and Chong DVDs, for Christ's sakes?
Okay, but my thought is that, well, then where's their incentive? He already moved it. Thank you very much. Now I can vote for the other guy.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't know. James T. Bartholomew. What are some of the funniest pieces of BS evidence or craziest lies in this cover-up? Example, police shooters, JFK's brain tampering, Ruth Payne Carr. Well, I think you did one. A Secret Service agent supposedly reaching back and shooting is probably one of the biggest.
George Hickey, yeah. Well, the driver, Greer.
That one
is great. Greer turns around, shoots Kennedy in the head. But George Hickey is just as good because he kills Kennedy in the Secret Service car with an AR-15. So pick your poison on that one. It's either Greer shooting him in the head from the front seat or George Hickey shooting him from behind with an AR-15.
There we go. Everybody comment below your favorite theory. All right, PD. Sorry, I still don't know what would LHO think his role would be on Assassination Day if he was picked up to get out of the TSD or TSBD, I think. What was he there for other than to be set up? If he's being set up, he wouldn't know what his role is. He would be reporting to work.
He works.
Get instructions later.
Right. What is my role? I have no role. I'm going to be eventually a patsy, which I'm not aware of. So I'm going to get a Coke and just eat my lunch. And then I'm going to go home and go to the movies. I know it's hard to believe, but it's possible he just said the truth when he said he was a patsy, that he went home like others did from the Texas School Book Depository. He's not the only one who was sent home. Everybody was. He went home. He changed his clothing. It's Friday night. There's no more work. He's going to the movies. Think about it as a normal linear event without any conspiratorial angle to those points. He gets on a bus. There's traffic. He gets off the bus, goes to the taxi stand. There's a woman who needs the cab. He gives her the cab. She thanks him. He's a Southern gentleman who gives her the taxi. He's not fleeing. He takes the next cab that comes along. He's not in a hurry, goes home, changes his coat, changes his shirt, puts on a coat because he doesn't have his coat, puts his gun in his waistband, and goes down the street to the Texas Theater on time at 1:00 to see the previews because he's a movie fanatic.
So
think about that.
Mark, you mean that Oswald left work because everybody sent home, like every other employee that day, and carried on with the activities that he was going to be doing on a normal Friday night, like all the other employees probably went home and carried on with whatever.
You could make the same, right. You could follow anybody else who went home and say, aha, look what they did. I think Buell Wesley Frazier probably would have done the same thing.
Or others.
Or others.
All right. BTK said, invite RFK Jr. It might be a good time.
I've invited him 500 times. He won't do it, bro. And he's not been on Viva and Barnes either.
Or Tim Pool,
bro. I've invited him. He said he's coming on 1 million times. I'm done with that fool.
All right.
Until 2028.
Soleil Souffle. Eric, I can't access my Eventbrite ticket for West Palm Beach. Would my receipt be enough to get in? The app says to ask you. You should have gotten an email from Leslie already, and we'll have your first name, last name. So if you're there, we have your name. There's a badge. Just show them. Go, hey, it's me. And you can show an ID.
There'll be a lot of gate crashing. We brought in some heavy security. Don't think you're getting in.
Good. It should be good.
Never going to happen.
Should be good. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. All right, Mark Duffy. This is a statement.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Bold.
All right. I really enjoy listening to these deep dives into JFK. Would love to hear Mark talk about the CIA for a whole episode. Well, good news.
Good news.
You can listen to Mark talking about the CIA for 4 full episodes. And there's even a playlist here on YouTube, the CIA, and there's 4 episodes on CIA in Hollywood, CIA in the news, CIA and our family of CIA, and CIA in the art world. And someday we'll do like CIA in the social media and other topics. But we
Well,
have
you could
4.
also buy the book CIA and Hollywood, which is written by Tricia Jenkins, about the infiltration of the CIA in the movie business. And there's a whole chapter on me in that book. She's a professor of media at the University of Texas in Austin.
All right. And it's bad. Who would have been the patsy if JFK would have been killed at LBJ's ranch?
I always wondered about that. I don't know. Yeah. Excuse me?
That would have been harder.
Right. I don't know who the patsy would have been other than some random cat that they caught in the woods. Because I think the shooters, from what I understand, would have been placed in the woods of the ranch. And there was quite a bit of woods there. So I don't know who that patsy would have been at that point.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, considering location, it could have been quote illegal at the time.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
There's a Mexico tie.
Yeah, it could be
Possibly.
a Mexican. It could be some rando Mexican,
or
a redheaded Negro.
Or who said that the only way that he could be killed is with a rifle?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, could he have said, "Okay, never mind, we'll just do poison"?
Yeah, I don't know. But that ranch thing, I think, was literally the last stop on the train.
All right. Scott Bimbo, who came up with the story that Gordon Liddy shot Tippit?
I guess you did. I guess you just did, bro.
Yeah,
I guess you did.
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thanks, Scott.
All right. Well, speaking of Oswald, we have questions on locals, and Oswald here is going to guide us, and we'll follow him over to locals. And I hope you guys consider doing this as well. Oh, is that the new Grodin book?
It's not the new Grodin book, but this is one of 3 Grodin books. I haven't received the new one yet. But these are all coffee table books, and we'll show the 3 next week. These are coffee table photographic books that are great to have. There's 2 of them, Killing the President. This one's The Search for Lee Harvey Oswald. And the third one, which just came out by Grodin, I've have in the mail, I guess, coming to me, and hopefully we'll have it by next week. Thanks to the JFK Book Fund people. But yeah, I mean, these people should have. I give these out for Christmas to people. These are great gifts. It's like a coffee table book with the introduction by Cyril Wecht. Incredible photos in here. And,
high quality paper. The thing.
Yeah, it's really nice. A great gift, and I assume the third one will be of that quality as well, which I just ordered through the JFK Book Fund donation. So thank you for that.
All right. Well, we're going to head over to locals. Again, it's free to become a locals member, and we deeply appreciate it. There's a lot of great free content there. You can hang out with us, watch the rest of the show, watch previous shows that are all without ads. They also, when we get a copyright claim and have to strip content out, they still have the content that got stripped out and things like that. So please consider going over there and following us there. We will see you momentarily.
Okay.